In 1190 AD, the largest city in North America north of Mexico was thriving. By 1300, it was completely empty and nobody left a note. The Ancestral Puebloans, often called the Anasazi by older scholars, faced a choice that most of us will never understand. They had to decide, with incomplete information and mounting pressure, whether to stay or leave their homeland, and they had to make that decision fast. What we're looking at is a mass migration that unfolded over roughly a century, but the real crisis compressed into just a few decades. Here's what happened, and more importantly, what they knew when they chose. Around 1100 AD, Mesa Verde was at its peak. Roughly 5,000 to 10,000 people lived in the region, in pueblos, cliff dwellings, and scattered farming settlements across the Colorado Plateau. They'd been there for nearly 700 years by that point. Corn, beans, and squash grew in their fields. They'd engineered sophisticated water systems. Turquoise and shells traveled to them from coasts 600 miles away. By every measure, this was success. But around 1130 AD, something shifted. The tree ring data, dendrochronology, tells us this with brutal precision. A severe drought hit the southwest, not a bad year. A multi-decade dry spell, harvest shrank. The math was simple and merciless. 5,000 to 10,000 people need consistent water and food. When both start vanishing, the clock starts ticking. For the first 40 or 50 years of this drought, the Puebloans didn't flee. They adapted. They dug deeper wells. They built check dams to catch every drop of runoff. They moved their fields. They rationed. They stored. Archaeological evidence shows they were fighting hard, but they were also watching their options narrow. Nobody abandons a home they've held for 7 centuries without exhausting every alternative first. Here's the critical gap in what they knew. They couldn't predict when the drought would end. Modern meteorologists can tell you a drought will last 5 years. They couldn't. They only knew that water was getting scarcer each season. So around 1180 to 1190 AD, some communities started leaving. Not everyone. Some groups stayed and dug in harder. But scouts and war parties began testing settlements to the south and east. They were gathering intelligence on a decision they hadn't made yet. By 1210 AD, the pressure intensified. The drought was now 80 years old. A new problem emerged: conflict. With resources tightening, violence between communities increased. Skeletal remains from this period show evidence of warfare, trauma marks, defensive wounds. Pueblos that had coexisted for centuries suddenly looked like threats. If you're already hungry and thirsty, a neighbor becomes a competitor. The leadership faced a brutal calculation: stay and gamble that the drought breaks, risking starvation and raids, or leave knowing that somewhere else might be better, but somewhere else wasn't guaranteed. The Pueblo people who left Mesa Verde in this period knew they had relatives and allies in the Rio Grande Valley to the east and in the little Colorado region to the south. Those communities had water. They also had established populations. Newcomers would be absorbed. But the cost was everything you owned. Between 1240 and 1280 AD, the exodus accelerated. Cliff dwellings that had housed families for generations were sealed up. Not burned, sealed. They left tools, pottery, and goods behind. They didn't trash their homes. They closed the doors as if they might come back. But they didn't. Archaeological surveys show that the population of the Mesa Verde region dropped by roughly 90% in just 4 decades. The final wave came around 1300 AD. The last clusters of people left. By that point, the regional drought had lasted 170 years. Their water sources had contracted to almost nothing. The choice was no longer a strategic calculation, it was survival, leave or die. The ancestral Puebloans of Mesa Verde made their decision and they executed it. They walked away. But here's what makes this a strategy story, not just a tragedy. They didn't vanish. That's the common misconception. The Puebloans themselves survived. They migrated to the Rio Grande Valley, to the little Colorado region, to Zuni lands. They brought their culture, their ceremonies, their knowledge with them. Modern Pueblo peoples, the Zuni, the Hopi, the Tiwa, the Tua, are the direct descendants of the people who left Mesa Verde. So the real question isn't what happened to them. They're still here. The real question is what forced their hand, and the answer is clear. A 170-year drought combined with resource competition and the knowledge that survival was possible elsewhere, those factors compressed a century-long migration into a few critical decades. They made the best decision they could with the information they had. They chose survival over sentiment. This is what separates a mystery from a disappearance. The ancestral Puebloans didn't vanish, they moved. And they moved because the constraints of their environment left them no other rational choice. It's a reminder that history isn't written by accidents. It's written by people making decisions under pressure, with incomplete data, and doing the math as best they can. Subscribe for more historical decisions that rewrote entire civilizations. Every week, a new mystery where the real story is what people knew when they chose.